Hi, we're here again doing Luminaire Club. We're going to have 3 sessions of doing quilting in the hoop, which is called Quiltbroidery. We are going to use a few different versions of quilt hoops that have magnetic hoops. We have the dime hoop from Dime, but we also are going to be using the Brother hoops that Brother are now starting to come out with. There are 3 different things that I want to touch base on with quilting, because there's many different things that you can do with quilting in the hoop. You can buy designs from other companies. Like, for instance, I'm going to use a Kimberbell design today. They have freestanding free motion quilting designs for in your hoop. They also have these new blue tile scenes, tile things that we can, and I'll show those to you in a little bit, that you can use when placing if you don't have the Luminaire. If you have the Stellaire but you're using a magnetic hoop, so you can't use the camera feature, you can use the tiles to help place everything. If you are using the Luminaire, you can use the projector, which is what we're going to do today. Today what I'm doing is I'm using the dime hoop because of the fact that the design I'm doing is wider than the Brother sashing frame that I can do, which is about a 7-inch width. This one I want more of an 8-inch width. So I'm doing the dime. When you're using the dime hoops, you do have to watch that it does not move the fabric, because it is a strong magnet. However, the fabric can slip. So you want to be very careful. The Brother hoops, they're more secure, so they don't slip as much as the dime hoops. So if you have a big garment like this, we're doing a nice little tree skirt type thing, then you want to make sure that you are with the machine while it's sewing, so it's free from getting tangled. You want to make sure that you have your backing, your batting, and your topping. I just baste it together. So I use 505 spray to baste it together, so I don't have any pins. I don't have to worry about any safety pins or any pins getting stuck in the machine by me forgetting that they're there. So I just 505 spray it, and then I hoop it. 505 I like because it's a stronger spray. And then what I do is no stabilizer. You just hoop it. You don't need that because you have all 3 layers. I then chose a piece of thread that will work for the backing. You can do cotton for embroidery, even when you're doing it in the hoop. I am actually going to be using a polyester today, but you can definitely use cotton. I've done it before. I am going to use a bottom line 60 weight top thread, which is a finer thread, because the higher the number, the finer the thread. The reason why I'm doing that is I like the silver bottom line thread, 60 weight, because it's more like invisible thread. So it just kind of, I don't want it sticking out, because this is just a beautiful little tree skirt. Has a lot of design to it, and I don't want my quilting designs to stick out. I just really want it for security purposes, and to quilt it down, so I don't want to have to tie it or anything. It'll look better quilted, but I don't really want it showing too much. So that's why I am doing that. I find that the bottom line silver just blends in really well with everything. So that's what I'm using for my top thread. I am using a regular embroidery needle for doing embroidery. You can use a quilting needle, but I find the embroidery needles work just fine. So that's what I'm going to use. And today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to use your projector and your scanner to scan and to perfectly precise position the design. And I want the design to perfectly be precise between this square here. The next few classes, what I'm going to teach you is in the Luminaire machine. If you go into My Design Center, you're going to have quilting designs in your machine. So I did that kind of fast. If you go into My Design Center and you hit on this little, mine is red, I don't know, yours might be a different color, but it has a little decorative stitch right here. If you hit that, you're going to get, it looks like another decorative stitch. It also looks like what do you call it, stippling stitch. And then if you hit that, you'll get the select menu to come up, and you have a whole bunch of quilting designs that you can choose from. In the next quilting, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take a design that we have, that we've embroidered out, but we don't want the quilting over the embroidery. We just want the quilting around it, and we're going to bring it in My Design Center we're going to actually pick a design off of here, and we're going to quilt all the way around the design, but not on top of the embroidery design. That will be our next video. And then the video after that, we will do more of edge to edge type quilting, showing you how to do borders and sashing type of things. And then as we get more more information on quilting, and they have more products for free motion quilting in the hoop, we will also be doing classes like that to show you more products that you can do to make quilting in the hoop easier, because most of us cannot afford or cannot fit a 10-foot quilting arm in, or quilting frame in their house or in their apartment, as for my issues. So this is perfect for me to do my quilting, especially on small pieces. You can do big pieces. You can also get, Dime has this endless, it's called endless hoop or endless quilting. It's like a bungee cord. So if you have a quilt, you can actually clip it, and it has a little frame that goes around it, and they're just little bungee cords that kind of hold the quilt up so it doesn't pull, because you want to make sure you have freedom all the way around so it doesn't pull or make your machine have to work too hard to move that arm back and forth. And you want to make sure that it doesn't run into anything when you're doing your quilting also. So those are the things that you want to definitely take a look at. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go out of here, and I'm going to go back into home, because we are going to just focus today on just hooping. Now you want to make sure, you don't have to have it perfectly positioned, but you want to make sure you have your design. So I want to do this block all in one shot. I want to do a design in there. And so what I'm going to do is I want a design that's going to go all the way around. It's about an 8x8 size. So I picked a design already in embroidery. I already put it in my saved items so that I can just bring it up, and I'm going to set it. It's right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the little camera with the little fabric behind it. I have the light on, so all these little bugs are coming over here, and now they're getting their bug guts on my machine. Excuse me. So I'm going to hit this little button. It's right above the edit, and I'm going to hit scan, and I'm going to hit the frame will move to be scanned with the built-in camera. So you want to make sure at this point that your fabric is moving freely around it. It's not going to get caught, and you don't want it to get caught underneath your hoop either, because you don't want this sewn into the back of your hoop. That would be not so good. So now the design, which you probably can't see it very well, is here on the screen. We're going to close this. If you want at this point, you can edit the design. So what I have it is perfectly, I try to have it perfectly positioned. You can go into edit mode, and I hit the rotate button, because you can rotate it and move it in the same thing without having to go out. If you just hit the move, you just have move. So you want to move it. Well, now I want to rotate it. So I go hit rotate. You have it all in one shot. So take and use the rotate and the move, because you can move and rotate your design all in one area. So if I wanted to move it over, I would move it over. I don't. I want to keep it where it is. I pretty much set it the way it was. If you want to resize it, you can resize it up to the point where you would have to redigitize it. If you need to redigitize it, because if you take a design that is going to be an 8x8 and you want to make it 9.5 by 14, when you resize it in the hoop on the machine, you can't redigitize it. So what happens is you're going to make it bigger, but it's going to keep the same amount of stitches. So what you want to do is you want to bring it into software to redigitize it so that it adds more stitches to it. Otherwise, you're going to get streaking issues with it. If you shrink it down and you don't redigitize it, you can shrink it down to a certain point in your machine. Once it needs to be redigitized, where it needs to take out stitches, you will have to bring it to your software. And your software will help by taking out some of those stitches. And you want that. Otherwise, you're going to get a very dense stitch, and it's not going to lay out very nice. And no matter how much fabric prepping you do, it still will not look right. So when you're resizing, if you get to the point where you're like, oh, it's not big enough, or oh, it's not small enough, you need to go and pick a size that's a bit bigger, or bring it to your software and resize it. So that's something that you definitely want to make sure that you have. Measure your design and make sure you have a design that's about the right size. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go now into embroidery, And now remember, when you're in embroidery, you can actually project your stitch out now to see if this is the way you want to have it placed, to make sure it's perfectly placed. So I hit the projector now, and now it should be displaying, and I can't see it because the reason why is because the color is weird. So I'm going to pick a different color so I can see it a little bit better. Let me try white. Now I did it in white, and now I can see it. And then I just moved that little red box. So if I want to see that it's going to line up on the corners and at the end so it doesn't go off the design, I can do that by just projecting it and then moving to make sure everything is lining up perfectly where I want it so it doesn't hit any of my other part of the fabric. And I can see this is a little bit hitting here. So I'm going to go up here. And I'm going to look up here to see where the design hits. And the design does not go outside, but it does go a little bit outside when I was down there. So I'm going to hit OK. And then what I'm going to do is I don't have to go out to edit mode. I just want to move it up a little bit. So I'm just going to move the design up a little bit, 2 notches, just so that it doesn't come outside the line. And I know it wasn't going outside the line up there. So now I know it should pretty much line up good. I can always reproject it to make sure. But I'm going to trust that everything's going to work out. And now, when you do your quilting designs, a lot of them will have basting or a straight box stitch. You don't want to stitch those out most of the time because you'll have to rip them out. So I move forward. I don't need that. I know that I have it lined up perfectly. If you're doing more things like perfect position, you want to make sure, then yeah, go ahead and stitch it out. You can just rip it out later if you want. So I'm going to hit the needle plus minus right down here at the bottom. I'm going to hit that button, and I'm going to move this down so I can move down to my next stitch. And I'm going to keep going until, because a lot of times people lay down like they're batting, so they're going to tack that down. Then they lay, like when you do the bench pillows for Kimberbell, you lay your stabilizer, you have your stabilizer, it'll do a stitch to show you where to lay your batting. Then it tacks down the batting, then you lay your fabric down, and then it tacks down your batting. So that's what those stitches are. We're not doing that, so we can go ahead and skip through that. I have now my fabric or my design up there. It's going to take 5 minutes to stitch out. I have the right thread I want. I'm going to go ahead and hit the go button and just let it stitch it out. It'll take about 5 minutes to stitch out, and I'm just going to make sure I stay here and kind of hold the fabric so it's out of the way, but so it doesn't pull at all either, so that the hoop comes out of place. Once I was doing this with another project and I walked away and I'm like, why is the thing not working very well? Oh, it broke a thread. So, and sometimes because I'm doing a finer thread, sometimes it'll do that. And I didn't change the needle, so I'm going to probably just turn it down a little bit so I don't get constant thread breakage. Also, when your thread breaks like that too, you want to back it up. So I'm going to back it up about 30 stitches because it takes a little bit before the machine realizes that you're out of thread. But what I'm going to do is go into my settings menu here, and I'm going to change the stitch down to 600 stitches per minute. But I'm also going to drop my pressure foot, and I probably am going to check, I'm going to drop my embroidery foot down to a 4 and see if that helps. I might have to bring it up. I'm just going to let it sew first, and then I'll see. Because if you have too much space between your foot and your fabric, sometimes you'll get the breaking also of your thread. And it seems to be okay. You want to have a credit card space or a dime space between, but you don't want it to pull. So when it goes over those seams, you do not want it to actually pull that seam, that fabric with that seam. So if it's too low, it will do that. So I'm going to watch it very carefully before it goes over that seam. And like when it went right over here, it did not pull, but it could in a different area. So I'm just going to watch it very carefully. But also another thing is the last time I did this and I walked away from it and I had the dime hoop on there, the fabric was so heavy that it was actually pulling in the back, and so then the hoop was just actually moving, but the fabric wasn't, and because it was just the fabric was so taut, so it it was actually stitching in the same spot because the fabric wasn't moving, the hoop was just moving. So you just have to be a little careful. These magnetic hoops are strong, but they sometimes when you have a heavy quilt, the quilt can win when you're playing tug of war. So with the Brother hoop, I have not had that experience, but those magnets they're pretty tough, but also you're spending a lot more. You're spending about 3 times the amount of money. See, it broke again. You're spending about 3 times the amount of money on that hoop than you are with the dime hoop. So you are paying for what you get. You're paying for a stronger hoop. Okay, something caught in there. Oh, it's the... Okay, another thing. This is good that we're talking about this. Another thing that happens. When you have your spool that is not cross-weaved, it's wound on the spool straight, it likes to be upright instead of horizontal. So one thing I'm going to do is instead of doing it horizontal like that, I'm going to pull, but also it's pulling really weird on the spool. So if it does break again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually pull it off the spool, and I'll show you that if it happens. But I want to make sure it's free flowing and it's pulling better now. So let's see. I'm going to back it up again. So see, it happens to me too. I know you guys tell me that your thread keeps breaking and stuff like that. Oops. And I'm talking and I'm not paying attention. I didn't finish threading it. Believe me, I understand it happens, but it's all troubleshooting. You just got to figure out what's going on. Why is it doing it? And a lot of times it might be the machine if you try different types of thread spools, but always try a different thread spool if it keeps doing it, because it might actually be the spool. It could be a defective spool. That happens where they just get wound on the spool weird, and it might work all the way up until the end, or it could happen from the beginning. I've had to throw out 2 spools of thread in my lifetime because of that. But majority of the time, it's just usually how I have the thread. Sometimes it's a little picky as to where it lands. So, as you can tell, I didn't check and I didn't get it all the way on. This side is out a little bit, but not that much. So I'm not too worried about it. And what's nice is I got a decorative silver thread in there. You won't even be able to tell. So when you do the projector, see, it did it again. And I think it just got caught on the spool. So we're going to do this. And people laugh at me when I tell them to do this, but I do. I do this a lot with metallic threads. And this is because it is a different type of thread that I don't normally use when I'm doing embroidery. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to back it up again, and I'm going to thread it. But I'm just going to hold the spool in my hand, and I'm going to pull it off the spool on my own. I do that a lot with metallic because it just tends to grip onto it, and then it won't pull, and I can feel it's pulling hard on the spool of thread. So if that's the problem and it's a spool issue, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that because I want to use up this thread as much as I can. And if I can unravel it myself. Now, if you have cats, they think it's a fun game when you do this. Luckily, mine are sleeping right now and they don't care to be out here bothering me right now, which is great because now I can just go ahead and stitch this out without them trying to play with the thread. And even if I'm using Kingstar metallic thread, which is like the best metallic thread out there, which is another thing you could do with freestanding or free motion quilting in the hoop. This is how I let it thread. I like to pull it off the thread myself to make sure it's coming off smoothly so I don't have any breakage issues. And since I'm not doing, 10,000, 100,000 stitches, I'm okay with doing this. It's only, 6 minutes out of my life. I'm okay with it. If it were something where I was doing 100, 200,000 stitches, it was going to take 30 or 40 minutes to stitch out. That'd be a different story. It keeps breaking. This is really old thread. I shouldn't say that, but it is. It is. I've had this for quite a long time. So, I know it's not the machine because I was stitching on it like beautiful yesterday. I know it's the thread. So, but I want to use this, and I want to use this up before I use another one. So, I'm stubborn. I'm going to use it. It's going to be used. Ouch. Another thing you could do is you can adjust your tensions, but I really don't want to adjust my tensions because I'm using a red on the bottom and I don't want to take a chance that it's going to come up. I forgot to back it up. And just like with everybody, there's going to be days where where your machine's going to work great, and then there's going to be days where your machine's going to, it seems like it's just giving you nothing but trouble. But most of the time on the Brothers, you don't have that issue, but it's usually a thread, or it's usually because you're tired, or it's usually because the moon is full. Who knows what it is. See, it's perfect down here, but over on the sides I forgot to check the sides there, but that's okay. It's okay. Frustrating. And you'll notice I haven't been pulling it from the bottom because it's breaking at the top. So I've had to unthread it this way. I've been forgetting to do that too. Luckily, if I pull the thread sensor out of place, because I always harp on that with all my customers, to make sure you snip the thread at the top, pull the thread from the bottom, and if you don't see it there, then you unthread it and then pull it straight down because you have a thread sensor right there. That will, you have a frayed thread, you can move it out of place, and if that happens, you're going to end up having to bring it in and having us put it back in place. Luckily, I know how to fix it if I do have that problem, but for your help at home, make sure you clip it at the top, pull it to the bottom. If you do snap and you don't have any thread on the bottom, just go back and unthread it. Once you get it to this point, just pull it straight down, and you won't have that problem anymore. So, all right. So, now it's done, and so I can go ahead and I can now shift it and do the other blocks. Once I'm done with the blocks, then I will be doing the corners, and I will show you how to do something like that with our next session. We will be showing you how to do like corners like this. Brother has actual quilt designs that you can actually use for that. But we can also go into iBroidery.com or through my design center, and we can actually bring up like a Kimberbell quilting design like this, and we can actually scan it, and then we can erase what we don't want stitched over here. So there's a way to do that, and we're going to go through and do some of that with you the next time. Might be on a different quilt, but it'll be the same concept. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of the stores. I am at the Appleton store most of the time. Jean is at the Green Bay store on Tuesdays and Sundays, and she is very knowledgeable on embroidery up in Green Bay. And then Wasa, you can definitely either call the Appleton store or talk to Gail or Yolanda are the embroidery experts there. But I am always at the Appleton store in the afternoons. If you ever want to give me a shout out, I can definitely help you over the phone or schedule a lesson, and we can do that too. So thanks for joining us. We will have another one coming out shortly. We are not going to be doing these monthly from now on. We're going to do them, try to get them out at least quarterly, if not 2 every quarter, just because of the time constraints right now with how busy the store is. So, but we hope to do some intense, more looking at things that you're doing on your embroidery machine that you guys will need help with. So you don't have to come in and every time to the store to get lessons on this stuff. And you can always refer back to it. That's the goal. So, but we're going to take it slow because there's a lot to do with embroidery. There's a whole bunch of stuff to learn on this with it, quilting and embroidery. Quiltbroidery is what they call it. So stay tuned and we will have more for you. Thanks.